A blizzard screams off the coast of Raven's Roost. The wind doesn't just howl, it hunts. Outside a remote coastal substation, a Navy SEAL named Lucas Reed looks through the storm and sees something that stops his heart. A 5-year-old boy kneeling in the snow, not collapsed, not crying, kneeling like a prayer frozen in time. Pressed against the child's back is a German Shepherd K9, its body wrapped around him, shielding him from the storm with the last of its strength. The dog is shaking. The boy is barely breathing, frozen into the child's fist, a torn scrap of dark wool soaked in blood. It is the only clue. Miles away, a desperate man grips the steering wheel of a truck, checking his watch. A debt unpaid, a secret buried. He believes the storm has erased his mistakes. He doesn't know the boy he left to die has just found the one man haunted by a storm like this before, and the one Christianin who will refuse to let the truth stay buried. What begins as a rescue will become a hunt. What looks like a victim will become a witness. And in the heart of the storm, you'll discover this truth. Sometimes, the ones who save us are the ones who were almost lost. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, subscribe and share this story with someone who needs hope today. Raven's Roost, Oregon was the kind of coastal town that looked peaceful on postcards and tried to kill you in real life. Tonight, it wasn't licking. Tonight, it was roaring. A coastal blizzard had slammed into the shoreline with a violence that felt personal, the kind of rare winter anomaly that turned familiar roads into blank white corridors and made the cliffs sound like they were being sandblasted by ice. Wind-driven salt spray froze mid-air and hit like needles. The world outside the windows wasn't a landscape anymore. It was a howling, moving wall. Inside the small substation near the cliff road, half police outpost, half emergency shelter, the fluorescent lights hummed with an aggressive steadiness, as if they could bully the storm into backing off. They couldn't. They could only make the interior look harsher. Gray laminate counters, scuffed linoleum, a coffee maker that smelled like burnt regret, and a clock that ticked too loudly for a room that empty. It was 2:37 a.m. Lucas Hawk Reed stood by the reinforced front window, arms folded, shoulders slightly hunched, as if the cold could seep through glass if you gave it a chance. He was in his late 30s, tall and lean in a way that suggested function over vanity. Long limbs, narrow hips, and a torso that looked built for endurance rather than show. His hair was dark brown, cut short enough that it never needed thinking about, and the stubble on his jaw wasn't a style choice so much as a side effect of a bad week. His nose had a faint bend, old and healed, and his eyes were the color of sea glass, green that could look gray in bad lighting. They were tired eyes, not sleepy, but worn down by the kind of exhaustion that sits behind the ribs. People who met him for the first time often decided he was cold. People who knew him longer realized he was simply careful with warmth, like it was something you rationed. He wasn't a local cop. He wasn't even supposed to be here. Lucas was a Navy SEAL assigned to assist with storm response after a string of violent weather events had stretched small counties thin. He'd done deployments that never appeared in the news and training cycles that bled together until the calendar stopped meaning anything. He moved with the quiet economy of someone who had learned, long ago, that wasted motion could cost you. But there was something else under that discipline, a ghost of an old rescue attempt that had gone wrong years earlier in another storm, another coastline, another night where wind and water decided the rules. He never talked about it. He didn't need to. It lived in him anyway, shaping the way he scanned doors and windows, shaping the way he listened to silence as if silence might be lying. He took a slow breath and watched the porch light struggle against the white churn outside. The beam didn't so much illuminate as surrender. It made a small cone of yellow in the madness, and beyond it, the storm erased everything. Lucas checked the clock again, not because time mattered, but because counting something gave his mind a rail to hold on to. He shifted his weight, rolled one shoulder, then leaned closer to the glass for his usual final look before the shift change. That was when he saw it. At first, it registered as wrongness, an interruption in the emptiness, a shape low to the ground, unmoving in the porch light's weak glow. For a half-second his brain tried to classify it as debris. Then the shape resolved. Smaller than debris, human, a child, kneeling in the snow like a tiny statue. Lucas's fatigue vanished. The change was instant and chemical, adrenaline hitting his bloodstream like a match thrown into gasoline. His hands were already moving. He didn't think, didn't debate, didn't look for a jacket. He slapped in the emergency release and shoved the heavy steel door open. The wind ripped it out of his grip. It slammed hard against the brick wall with a sound like a gunshot. The cold punched into his lungs so sharply it stole his breath, and snow whipped across his face in stinging sheets. He stepped down into drifts that swallowed his boots to the shin and pushed forward. "Hey!" he shouted, but the wind took the word and threw it into the night. Then he saw the second shape. Curled around the child's small back was a dog, large, black and tan, the heavy silhouette of a working German shepherd. Its coat was caked with ice and its body was pressed tight against the child, as if it could share whatever heat it had left. The dog's chest moved in shallow, rapid breaths. Its head snapped up at Lucas's approach, and a low growl vibrated from deep in its throat. It wasn't a healthy growl. It was the sound of a guard who had been awake too long and was still refusing to quit. Lucas stopped a few feet away and lifted his gloved hands, palms outward, the universal language of, "I'm not here to hurt you." "Easy," he said, voice steady, calm but firm. "Easy, buddy, I'm helping." The dog's lips pulled back, teeth visible, but its legs trembled so hard Lucas could see the weakness even through the storm. The animal wasn't posturing, it was running on fumes. Its amber eyes, sharp, intelligent, and furious, flicked from Lucas's face to the child and back again, measuring. Lucas took a careful step closer. The child didn't move. The posture was wrong. Head bowed, shoulders rounded, arms drawn in, not sleeping, not resting, surrendering. Lucas dropped to his knees in the snow. Cold soaked through the fabric instantly, but he didn't register it. He reached for the child's neck with 2 bare fingers after ripping off 1 glove. He found the pulse under the jawline. There, faint, thread thin, but there. "Okay," Lucas breathed, more to himself than anyone. "Okay, kid, stay with me." He slid an arm under the child and lifted. The boy was terrifyingly light, all ice-stiff limbs and thin pajamas, the kind with faded cartoon, shapes that didn't belong in the middle of a blizzard. The child's skin was waxy, pale with a bluish tint. Lucas held him tight against his chest, turning his body to shield the boy from the wind as much as possible. As he turned, the dog tried to stand. Its front legs rose, then buckled. It made a sound, not a bark, not a whine, but a strained breath of pain. Then it dragged itself forward on its belly, claws scraping against the ice under the snow. It wasn't trying to follow Lucas for comfort. It was trying to keep its position near the child. Lucas swallowed hard. He'd seen loyalty in men. He'd trained beside it, relied on it, buried it. But seeing it in a half-frozen animal, in a place like this, did something sharp to his chest. "You too," Lucas said, but voice tight. "Come on." He backed toward the door, the wind fighting him like a living thing. He kicked the door wider and stumbled inside with the child. The dog collapsed over the threshold, half in and half out, ice melting off its coat onto the mat in dark droplets. Lucas hooked a boot under the dog's flank and dragged it fully inside before slamming the door shut. The silence afterward was brutal. The heater clanked. Fluorescent lights hummed. Lucas's breathing sounded too loud. He laid the child gently on the dispatch desk. Under the bright light, the boy looked even smaller, 5 years old at most. Lucas saw frost on the eyelashes, skin mottled with cold, lips tinged blue. He keyed his shoulder mic with fingers that were suddenly shaking. "Dispatch, this is Hawk at the Cliff substation," he said, voice controlled but edged. "I need a medic unit now. Pediatric. Severe hypothermia. Unresponsive but has pulse. Repeat, severe hypothermia." He turned back to the child's hands. The boy's right fist was clenched tight, so tight the knuckles were white even through the cold. Something dark was frozen into his grip. Lucas leaned closer and felt his stomach drop. A jagged scrap of thick, dark wool fabric, stuck to the skin by ice. There was blood on it, dark and dried enough to look almost black. Lucas's mind clicked through possibilities with the ruthless speed of training. Kids didn't wander out into blizzards clutching bloody fabric. Kids didn't kneel outside stations like they were praying for someone to find them. And dogs didn't wrap themselves around a child's body unless there was a reason. He looked down at the German shepherd on the mat. The dog lay on its side in a widening pool of meltwater and mud, ribs moving with shallow breaths. It was too weak to lift its head, but its eyes never left the boy on the desk. Those amber eyes weren't wild. They were fixed, intentional. the eyes of something that had made a decision and was waiting for the next one. Lucas crouched near it, keeping his voice low. "You did this," he murmured, as if the dog could understand the shape of the words, if not their meaning. "You brought him here." The dog's tail, heavy, ice-matted, gave the smallest thump against the floor, then went still again. Lucas straightened slowly, the evidence in the boy's fist pulling at his attention like a hook. Outside, the storm continued to shriek. Inside, the room felt like a bubble of light floating in a black sea. He didn't have the boy's name yet. He didn't have the dog's name either, but he had a pulse, a witness, and a clue frozen in a child's hand. And Lucas Reed, SEAL, rescuer, man who hated storms because storms never played fair, felt something shift in him. A familiar weight, yes, but also a direction. The night had just handed him a mission. He glanced at the clock again. 1:59 a.m. 2 minutes had passed since he had looked away. It felt like the world had changed. When the station radio crackled with the incoming medic unit's acknowledgement, Lucas didn't feel relief. He felt the beginning of a hunt. The first rule Lucas Reed followed wasn't written in any manual. It had been hammered into him years ago by cold oceans, night extractions, and the quiet aftermath of things that went wrong. Cold kills slowly, and then all at once. You never rushed it. You never fought it head on. You worked around it, patiently, methodically, like diffusing a bomb that didn't care whether you were scared or not. He stood over the dispatch desk, the boy's small body laid out beneath the fluorescent lights, and forced himself to breathe evenly. Panic was contagious. So was calm. The child, 5 years old, maybe younger, lay motionless except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. His pajamas were stiff with ice, the fabric darkened where meltwater soaked in. His skin had the unnatural waxy pallor Lucas had seen too many times before. Hypothermia didn't look dramatic. It looked quiet, like someone turning the volume down on a life. Lucas stripped off his wet gloves and unzipped his jacket. His fingers were already numb, but he welcomed the pain. Pain meant blood was still moving. He reached for the trauma shears hanging from his go bag and cut carefully through the boy's pajama top, peeling the frozen fabric away in sections. He worked slowly, deliberately, narrating under his breath, not because the boy could hear him, but because it kept Lucas anchored. "Okay, kid, easy, I've got you." He didn't rub the boy's arms or legs. That was a mistake rookies made, and mistakes with hypothermia were often fatal. Instead, he wrapped the boy's torso with emergency blankets, thick, wool-lined ones that smelled faintly of dust and old storage rooms. He tucked them tight around the chest and abdomen, creating a cocoon meant to protect the core. The limbs would wait. The heart came first. The station heater rattled louder as if offended by the amount of work it was suddenly expected to do. Warm air crept into the room inch by inch, battling the cold that clung stubbornly to every surface. Lucas checked the boy's pulse again. Still there, still faint. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Don't go anywhere yet." Behind him, the German shepherd shifted. Lucas turned his head slightly, keeping the boy in his peripheral vision. The dog lay on the welcome mat near the door, its body stretched out awkwardly, as if it had collapsed mid-command. Meltwater pooled beneath its thick coat, darkening the mat and spreading across the linoleum. The dog's breathing was shallow, rapid, each breath a visible effort. Its ribs moved under the fur like bellows running out of air. But the eyes, those eyes were still alive. They were a deep amber, sharp even through exhaustion, tracking Lucas's every movement. Not suspicious, not aggressive, focused. The kind of gaze Lucas recognized from teammates on Overwatch. Men who were hurt, but still very much on the job. The dog's ears twitched as Lucas stepped closer to the desk again. A low sound escaped its throat. Not a growl this time, more of a strained whine that carried equal parts pain and warning. "I'm not touching him," Lucas said quietly, glancing back. "You're doing fine. You did your job." The dog didn't relax, but the sound softened. Its head dropped back to the floor with a dull thump, strength finally giving out. Still, its eyes never left the child. Lucas glanced at the boy's clenched right hand again. The scrap of dark wool remained frozen to his skin, stubborn as a secret. Lucas resisted the urge to pry it loose. Evidence or not, tearing it away could tear skin with it. That would wait for warmer hands and medical help. He keyed his radio again. "ETA on that medic unit?" A burst of static answered, then a voice, female, clipped, professional. "Unit en route. 10 minutes, Hawk. Roads are bad." 10 minutes could be a lifetime. Lucas nodded to no one and moved back to the dog. He crouched down slowly, careful not to startle it. Up close, he could see the extent of the damage. Ice clung to the dog's whiskers and muzzle. One ear bore a small notch, old, healed. The paws were raw and reddened where ice had worked its way between the pads. This wasn't a pampered pet. This was a working animal, a survivor. "You're a tough one," Lucas said, tone neutral but respectful. "How old are you? 6? 7? The dog blinked once, slowly. Lucas reached for a clean blanket from the supply shelf and draped it gently over the dog's back, avoiding sudden movements. The dog tensed for a fraction of a second, then allowed it. "Another small concession. That's it," Lucas murmured. "Just some warmth." As he worked, his mind ran parallel tracks. The boy, the dog, the fabric, the way the child had been kneeling, not collapsed, not crawling, but kneeling, head bowed. That wasn't accidental. That was a child who had reached the end of something and chosen stillness over panic. Lucas didn't like what that implied. He glanced toward the front door, half expecting the storm to force its way back inside. The building groaned softly as wind battered the exterior. Raven's Roost wasn't a place that forgave mistakes. It was a town that survived by learning its limits early. The radio crackled again, closer this time. "Hawk, medic unit is 3 minutes out." "Copy," Lucas said. "Be advised, I've also got a canine with severe exposure, Shepherd. He's critical but conscious." "Understood," came the reply. "We'll handle both." Lucas exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized how tightly he had been holding himself until that moment. A sudden movement snapped his attention back to the desk. The boy's lips trembled, just barely. A reflex, maybe. Or something else. Lucas leaned in immediately, lowering his voice. Hey, kid. Can you hear me?" No response. The boy's eyes remained closed, lashes tipped with moisture as frost melted. Lucas checked the pulse again, still there, a touch stronger, maybe. Or maybe he was imagining it because he wanted to. "Okay," Lucas said softly. "That's okay. You don't have to talk." He paused, then added, almost without thinking, "Your dog's here. He's not going anywhere." The German Shepherd's tail thumped once against the mat. Lucas blinked and let out a breath that was dangerously close to a laugh. "Yeah, I figured." The first siren cut through the storm like a blade. Red light flashed through the front windows, fractured and distorted by the blowing snow. The sound grew louder, then cut abruptly as the vehicle pulled up outside. Doors slammed, boots crunched through ice. The station door burst open, letting in a blast of cold and chaos. Sarah Jenkins stepped inside first. She was in her mid-50s, compact and wiry, built like someone who had learned long ago how to take up as little space as possible and still command a room. Her gray hair was cut short and practical, the kind of haircut chosen by people who didn't want to think about mirrors. Her skin was weathered from years of coastal sun and wind, lined in a way that spoke of endurance rather than age. Her eyes, sharp blue, alert, took in the entire scene in a fraction of a second. Child on the desk, seal kneeling, dog on the floor, blood-stained fabric. She didn't waste time on questions. "Pediatric hypothermia?" she asked, already snapping nitrile gloves onto her hands. "Yes," Lucas said, moving back to give her space. 5 years old, found outside in the blizzard. Pulse is thready but present. Sarah nodded once, brisk. "Good job keeping him wrapped." Ben. Her partner, Ben Morales, followed her in. Younger, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, hauling a pediatric kit and a thermal IV pack. He looked like someone still new enough to feel the weight of every call, but experienced enough not to freeze. "Rectal temp," Sarah said. "Warm IV ready. Let's move." She reached for the boy's arm. The growl came from the floor like thunder in a cave. Everyone froze. The German Shepherd surged upright with a strength that shouldn't have been possible, staggering but determined, placing itself squarely between Sarah and the desk. Its lips pulled back, teeth bared, amber eyes blazing with something primal and absolute. Ben swore under his breath. "Whoa!" Sarah didn't step back. She simply stopped, slowly. Her gaze flicked to Lucas. "Your dog? He's not mine," Lucas said evenly. "He was with the boy. He kept him alive." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then get him under control. I can't treat the kid if that dog takes my arm off." Lucas stepped forward immediately, positioning himself in the dog's line of sight. He lowered himself to one knee, keeping his movements deliberate. "Easy," he said, voice low. "They're helping him. Same as me. Same as you." The dog's growl wavered, conflicted. Its eyes darted to the boy, then back to Lucas. The tension in its body was visible, muscles trembling with exhaustion and restraint. Lucas met its gaze. "You did your part," he said quietly. "Now let us do ours." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the dog let out a long, shuddering breath. Its legs buckled, and it collapsed back onto the mat, strength finally spent. Its head rested on its paws, eyes still locked on the child. Sarah nodded once, a flicker of something like respect passing across her face. "All right," she said. "Let's work." As the medics moved in, Lucas stepped back, hands clenched at his sides, watching the boy and the dog with equal intensity. Whatever had happened out there in the storm wasn't over. It had just crossed the threshold. The station changed the moment the medics took control. It always did. What had been a place of waiting turned into a place of motion, hands moving with purpose, equipment opening and closing, clipped voices layering over one another with practiced efficiency. Lucas Reed stepped back until his shoulders brushed the cold metal of the supply cabinet, giving the room to people whose entire lives were built around pulling others back from the edge. Sarah Jenkins worked with quiet authority. She moved like someone who had long since stopped wasting energy on unnecessary gestures. Every step economical, every motion deliberate. She was not tall, barely over 5.5 feet, but she carried herself with the compact certainty of someone who had survived enough chaos to know exactly where she stood in it. Her gloved hands were steady as she attached monitors to the boy's chest, her eyes flicking between numbers and skin tone, reading both with equal fluency. "Core temp is dangerously low," she said, not looking up. "But his heart's still fighting." Ben Morales knelt on the other side of the desk, unspooling tubing and preparing the warmed IV line. He was in his early 30s, broad through the shoulders, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat and melted snow. There was a tension in him, controlled but present, the kind you saw in people who still cared deeply about every outcome. He glanced once at the German shepherd on the floor, then back to the child, visibly recalibrating his sense of normal. Lucas watched from the edge of the room, arms crossed tight across his chest. He knew better than to interfere, but standing still felt wrong. His eyes kept drifting back to the boy's right hand. The fist was still clenched. Sarah noticed. "His hand," she said, pausing. "What's he holding?" Lucas stepped forward slightly. "Fabric, wool, it's frozen to his skin." Sarah leaned in, her brow furrowing. She didn't tug. Instead, she assessed it the way she assessed everything, carefully, without assumptions. "We'll need to free it," she said, "but not by force." She reached into the kit and pulled out a sterile water bottle, cracked the seal, and let a slow stream of lukewarm water flow over the boy's clenched fingers. Steam rose faintly as ice softened and began to melt. The boy flinched once, a small involuntary twitch, then went still again. As the ice released its grip, the fabric came loose. Sarah lifted it gently with forceps and held it up under the light. It was a jagged scrap of thick, dark wool, heavy duty, the kind woven to endure hard weather and harder use. One edge was torn, fibers pulled and stretched like it had been ripped away by desperate fingers. A large section was stained dark, almost black with dried blood. Ben scanned the boy's exposed skin immediately. "I don't see any active bleeding," he said. Sarah nodded. "Neither do I." She dropped the scrap into a sterile low evidence bag and sealed it with a practiced snap. Then she handed it to Lucas without ceremony. "I don't think this blood is his," she said quietly. The bag felt heavier than it should have in Lucas's hand. He looked down at the boy, at the pale skin, the shallow breaths, the thin rise and fall of his chest. There were no cuts, no wounds that could account for that much blood. His gaze shifted to the dog. The German shepherd lay motionless on the mat, chest still working hard, eyes never leaving the desk. Melt water pooled beneath him, carrying dirt and salt across the floor. One of his back legs twitched intermittently, a sign of deep cold and exhaustion. But when Lucas met his gaze, there was awareness there, recognition. This wasn't an accident. The realization settled into Lucas's bones with a cold certainty. Kids didn't clutch bloody fabric unless it mattered. Dogs didn't push themselves past collapse unless they were protecting something from someone. Sarah's voice cut back in. "We need to transport now. He's stabilizing, but barely. Clinic's the best option. Roads to the main hospital are a nightmare." Lucas nodded. "I'll follow." She glanced down at the dog. "What about him?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "He comes with us." Sarah considered that for half a second, then nodded. Good. He's earned a warm ride. Ben grabbed the gurney and slid it into position. Together, they transferred the boy, small, bundled, frighteningly light, onto the padded surface. As they lifted, the German shepherd made a sound from deep in his chest, a weak, aching whine. Lucas crouched beside him. Hey, he said softly, you're not being left, I promise. The dog's ears twitched. His tail thumped once. The ride to the clinic was short and brutal. Lucas drove his patrol vehicle behind the ambulance, lights cutting uselessly through the storm. The road had disappeared beneath ice and drifting snow, and he navigated more by memory than sight. Every corner felt sharper, every stretch longer. Inside his car, the evidence bag lay on the passenger seat, the dark wool visible through the plastic like a bruise. The clinic was a squat 2-story brick building set back from the road, more fortress than hospital. Its lights cut a harsh white rectangle into the storm as the ambulance slid into the bay. Lucas parked crookedly, tires fighting for traction, and jumped out before the engine had fully cut. The German shepherd lay on the passenger side floor, shivering violently. He was too weak to stand on his own. Lucas opened the door and knelt, sliding his arms under the dog's chest and abdomen. Come on, he grunted. Just a little more. The dog whined as Lucas lifted him, the sound thin but not panicked. His legs splayed when they hit the ground, claws scraping on the frozen pavement, but he stayed upright with Lucas's support. Up close, Lucas could smell wet fur, salt, and something else. Iron and cold. They moved inside together. The clinic interior hit them like a wall. Warm air, antiseptic light, the faint smell of disinfectant, and old coffee. A nurse at the reception desk looked up sharply, eyes widening at the sight of a snow-covered seal holding up a half-dead German shepherd. He's with the child, Lucas said before she could speak. His voice carried the flat authority of someone who didn't intend to debate. He's not a stray, he's a victim. The nurse, Diaz, according to her badge, nodded immediately and disappeared into a supply room. Lucas guided the dog into a corner away from the drafts and eased him down onto the linoleum. The dog refused to lie fully on his side. Instead, he propped himself up awkwardly. Boar, agree, head lifted, gaze fixed down the corridor where the gurney had vanished. His watch wasn't over. Lucas straightened slowly, hands shoved deep into his pockets. Adrenaline drained away in a rush, leaving behind a hollow ache that settled into his muscles. This was the part he hated, the waiting, the part where there was nothing left to do but think. He pulled the evidence bag from his pocket and held it up under the clinic's fluorescent lights. The wool fibers were coarse, tightly woven, built to last. This wasn't cheap clothing. This was a jacket meant for cold, meant for work outdoors. The blood was dark, soaked deep into the fabric, not the bright spray of a fresh wound. The slow, heavy stain of something that had bled and kept going. Lucas's jaw tightened. He crouched near the dog again. You saw it, he murmured. Didn't you? The German shepherd's eyes flicked to him. There was no fear there, no confusion, only a deep, exhausted alertness. You were there, Lucas continued softly. Whatever happened out there. The dog didn't move, but something in his stillness felt like confirmation. Footsteps approached down the hall. A man in his early 60s stepped into view, thin and slightly stooped, wearing a white lab coat over a worn gray cardigan. His hair was white and unruly, his wire-rimmed glasses magnifying eyes that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by it. This was Dr. Alistair Finch, the clinic's head physician, and tonight, its only doctor. That was quite an entrance, Finch said dryly. His voice was calm, edged with fatigue and a dark, understated humor. The boy's name is Noah. He's 5. We're warming him now. Lucas nodded, tension easing just a fraction. Is he? He's alive, Finch said, which, given the circumstances, borders on miraculous. Lucas exhaled. But, Finch continued, glancing toward the hallway, he's in shock, not just from the cold. He's awake, but he's not present, staring, unresponsive. Lucas's gaze drifted back to the dog. He responds to him, he said quietly. Finch followed his line of sight and studied the German shepherd for a long moment. Sometimes, he said, slowly, the medicine we need doesn't come in a bottle. He looked back at Lucas. Room 3. Lucas nodded once and moved down the corridor. As he reached the door, he paused, hand hovering over the handle. He glanced back at the dog. Stay, he said softly. The dog's ears twitched. His eyes never left the hallway. Lucas stepped into the room, Noah lay in the bed, dwarfed by white sheets and thermal blankets. His small hands were bandaged. His eyes were open, staring at a blank patch of wall, pupils wide and empty. Lucas felt the familiar chill creep up his spine. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Room 3 was too quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet. No soft beeps, no murmured reassurances, but the hollow kind, the kind that pressed inward and made every breath feel intrusive. The overhead light was dimmed, casting a pale, almost colorless glow over the hospital bed. Noah lay beneath layers of thermal blankets, his small body nearly disappearing beneath their weight. His hands were wrapped in gauze, fingers stiff and awkward, like they belonged to someone else. His eyes were open. They stared at the wall without focus, wide and glassy, reflecting light but not meaning. He didn't flinch when Lucas entered, didn't track movement, didn't blink when Lucas spoke his name. "Noah," Lucas said softly, stopping a few feet from the bed. He kept his hands visible, empty, resting at his sides. He had learned long ago that people in shock didn't respond to volume or urgency. They responded, sometimes, to presence. "My name's Lucas. I'm the one who brought you in from the storm." Nothing. Lucas stepped closer, boots whispering against the linoleum. He could see the faint tremor in the boy's lower lip now, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched in tiny, involuntary movements. His breathing was shallow but steady. The monitor at the bedside ticked along, indifferent and precise. "You're safe," Lucas continued, pitching his voice low, even. "You're warm. The storm can't get you in here." Still nothing. Lucas felt something old and heavy stir in his chest. He'd seen this look before, not just in children, but in grown men pulled from wreckage and water, in teammates who had survived the blast but not yet the memory. The body lived, the mind hid. He ran a hand slowly over his face and exhaled through his nose. He wasn't trained for this part. He could stabilize a wound, carry someone through fire, hold a perimeter until dawn. But this quiet retreat behind the eyes, was a different battlefield. From the doorway, Dr. Alistair Finch watched him for a moment, then spoke quietly. "He hasn't responded to us," the doctor said. "Not to touch, not to voice. His vitals are improving, but his mind's somewhere else." Lucas nodded without looking away from the boy. "Where?" Finch hesitated. "Wherever the worst moment is." Lucas closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, he glanced back down the hallway toward the waiting area. An idea surfaced. Unorthodox, irrational, and yet so obvious it felt like the room itself had been pointing him toward it. "Doctor," Lucas said slowly, "I want to bring the dog in." Finch's eyebrows lifted slightly. He studied Lucas's face, reading the resolve there. "The German Shepherd?" "Yes." Finch exhaled, then nodded once. "Sometimes," he said again, quieter this time, "the medicine we need doesn't come in a bottle." Lucas didn't wait for permission beyond that. He stepped back into the hallway. The clinic was quieter now, the chaos of arrival replaced by a tense stillness. Nurse Diaz moved behind the desk, murmuring into a phone. Somewhere down the corridor, a cart rattled softly. The German Shepherd was where Lucas had left him. He lay on a nest of folded blankets near the staff break room, a saline ivar line running into his foreleg. The dog's breathing was deeper now, steadier, though exhaustion still weighed heavy on his frame. His coat, once stiff with ice, had begun to dry, revealing the rich black saddle and tan legs beneath. He was big, even for a shepherd, his body built long and powerful, muscle visible beneath fur worn thin by hardship. There were scars if you knew how to look for them. Small patches where hair didn't grow quite right, signs of old injuries that had healed without fuss. Dr. Finch knelt beside him, adjusting the IV flow with careful hands. "He's severely dehydrated," Finch said without looking up. "Undernourished, too. I'd guess he hasn't had a full meal in days." Whatever kept him going out there, it wasn't calories. The dog lifted his head as Lucas approached, ears pricking forward. His eyes locked onto Lucas's face immediately, recognition sparking there. Lucas crouched. "Hey," he said quietly, "you still with me?" The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, weak but deliberate. Lucas reached out slowly, letting the dog sniff his gloved hand before touching him. The shepherd leaned into the contact just slightly, a brief allowance. "I need your help," Lucas said. He didn't dress it up, didn't soften it. Animals like this didn't respond to theatrics. "The kid's not coming back yet, but I think he might, for you." The dog held his gaze, amber eyes intent. Something shifted in his posture. Not strength, not readiness, but focus, like a tool being lifted from rest. Lucas carefully unhooked the IV line, glancing at Finch. "Just a minute," he said. "I'll bring him right back." Finch studied the dog, then Lucas. "All right," he said, "but don't push him. He's got nothing left to give." Lucas nodded. "I won't." He looped a soft leash around the dog's neck, not a restraint, just guidance, and stood slowly. The dog staggered as he rose, legs unsteady, but he stayed upright. Pride mattered to creatures like this. Together they moved down the hallway. As they approached room 3, the dog's body changed. The exhaustion didn't vanish, but it was overridden by something else. His head lifted higher, his ears angled forward, his nose worked the air, drawing in scents that Lucas couldn't read but instinctively trusted. Lucas opened the door. The change was immediate. Noah's eyes moved, just a fraction at first, a flicker, a shift away from the blank wall. His gaze landed on the doorway, unfocused but searching. The German Shepherd stepped into the room. He didn't rush, didn't bark. He moved with slow, deliberate steps, claws clicking softly against the floor. He approached the bed and stopped, standing tall despite the tremor in his legs. He sniffed the air once, then let out a low, aching whine, not of pain, but of recognition. Noah's lips parted. A sound came out. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even a full syllable, just a small, broken noise caught somewhere between breath and voice. "Kay!" Lucas's heart slammed against his ribs. The dog moved closer. He placed his front paws gently on the edge of the mattress and leaned forward, pressing his cold, damp nose beneath the boy's bandaged hand. He whined again, softer this time, a sound meant only for one listener. Noah's fingers twitched, then they curled. They gripped the dog's fur. It was sudden and desperate, like a drowning person finding something solid. Noah's face crumpled, and a tear slid from the corner of his eye, tracing a clean line down his temple. He turned his head, burying it against the shepherd's thick neck. And then the dam broke. Words spilled out, tangled and rushed, muffled by fur and sobs. Fragments, not sentences, pieces of fear too heavy to organize. "No, no, big truck, loud." The boy shook, his body tensing beneath the blankets. Beard man," his voice cracked. Mommy crying. Lucas leaned in, every muscle locked. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush. He waited for the words to find their own shape. "He took her," Noah whispered finally, clutching the dog tighter. "He took Mommy." The room seemed to tilt. Lucas felt the floor drop away beneath his feet, the implications crashing together in his mind with brutal clarity. This wasn't a child who had wandered off. This wasn't exposure or bad luck. This was a witness. Lucas straightened slowly and met Dr. Finch's gaze across the room. The doctor's expression had changed, professional distance giving way to grim understanding. Lucas backed out of the room, careful not to break the fragile moment between boy and dog. He closed the door softly behind him. At the nurse's station, Diaz looked up. "Officer?" Lucas's voice was steady, but there was steel under it now. "What's the boy's last name?" Diaz blinked, fingers moving across the keyboard. "Vance," she said. "Noah Vance. His mother is Maya Vance. She's the only listed next of kin." Lucas nodded once and turned away, already reaching for his radio. Outside, the storm howled against the clinic walls, impatient and cruel. Lucas Reed stepped into it without hesitation. The rescue was over. The hunt had begun. The storm didn't care that the mission had changed. It howled just as fiercely as Lucas Reed pulled the clinic door open and stepped back into the night. Radio clipped to his shoulder, jaw set hard enough to ache. Snow lashed sideways, driven by wind that smelled of salt and iron, and the parking lot lights smeared into pale halos through the blowing white. Somewhere behind him, Noah clung to the German Shepherd and spoke in broken fragments. Somewhere ahead, a woman named Maya Vance was missing. Lucas didn't run. He moved with purpose, fast, controlled, economical. Panic burned energy you couldn't afford to lose. He slid into the patrol vehicle, slammed the door, and keyed the ignition. The engine turned over reluctantly, then caught, the heater coughing out lukewarm air like an apology. Lucas wiped a circle clear on the windshield with his sleeve and pulled out, tires fighting for purchase on ice-slick pavement. "Dispatch," he said into the radio. "This is Hawk. I need a welfare check upgraded to a high-risk missing person. Adult female, Maya Vance." Static crackled, then the familiar gravelly voice answered. "Copy that, Hawk. Last known address?" 814 Hiker's Trace, Lucas said, already turning the wheel. And I need everything you've got on a local, matching the description beard man. Big, aggressive, drives a large vehicle. The pause on the line was brief but telling. Yeah, the dispatcher said slowly, that rings a bell. Marge Halloway had been dispatching in Raven's Roost longer than most of the town's residents had been alive. She was in her late 60s, voice roughened by cigarettes she never admitted to, and decades of night shifts. She knew every road, every feud, every man who caused trouble and then vanished before it could stick. If anyone knew who the Beard Man was, it was Marge. Lucas guided the car through the streets that had lost their edges beneath the snow. Houses blurred past, dark, shuttered, hunkered down against the weather. Raven's Roost at night during a storm was a place stripped to essentials: shelter, heat, survival. Hiker's Trace sat on the far side of town, a newer development built to lure young families and mill workers who didn't mind isolation until isolation minded them back. The road narrowed, streetlights fewer and farther between, the wind louder as the houses thinned. Only one local fits that description, Marge continued. Name's Gideon Kane, pops up every few years. Complaints, mostly. Trespassing, threatening hikers, poaching, big guy, heavy beard, mean streak. Lucas's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Address? Off-grid for the most part, Marge said. But last known hangout was up north, near the old service roads. Don't like him, Hawk. He's slippery. Lucas didn't respond. His attention was on the house coming into view. The Vance residence was dark. That alone was wrong. In a storm like this, people left porch lights on. They left something burning, something glowing, a small declaration of existence against the weather. This house offered nothing, just a low, squat silhouette against the blowing snow. Lucas parked at the curb, the blizzard already working to bury the vehicle. As he stepped out, his boot nudged something hard. A child's tricycle lay on its side in the walkway. It was small and blue, the plastic dulled by weather. One handlebar twisted into the snow. The front wheels spun lazily in the wind, squeaking faintly, a cheerful sound made obscene by context. Lucas drew his weapon. He didn't bother with the doorbell. "Maya Vance," he shouted, voice ripped apart by the wind. "Raven's Roost, PD." No answer. He moved up the porch steps, each one creaking under a skin of ice. The front door was slightly ajar, opening inward just enough to let snow drift across the threshold. Doors didn't stay ajar in blizzards. Lucas pushed it open fully. The splintered wood around the deadbolt told the rest of the story. This hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been carelessness. It had been forced. The air inside the house was stale and cold. Either the power was out, or it had been shut off. Lucas swept his flashlight beam across the entryway. Snow had been tracked in by heavy boots, the prints overlapping, chaotic. A throw blanket lay crumpled on the floor, half dragged from the couch. A child's sippy cup had rolled into a corner and tipped over, its contents frozen solid. Lucas moved deeper, clearing corners automatically, his body doing what his mind didn't have time to narrate. "Maya," he called again, softer now. It felt useless, but habit demanded it. The kitchen was the epicenter. A coffee mug lay shattered on the linoleum. Dark grounds and cold liquid splashed in a fan-shaped pattern across the floor. A wooden chair was overturned, one leg snapped clean off. The table bore a long gouge, like something had been dragged across it in anger. This was where the struggle had happened. Lucas crouched, scanning the floor. His light caught on something near the refrigerator, a small boot. It was a child's, cartoon dinosaurs along the side, Velcro strap torn loose. Lucas stared at it for a long moment, the image of Noah's bandaged feet flashing through his mind. This was the other boot. The radio crackled sharply, the sudden sound making Lucas tense. "Unit 3, Marge said. "You still with me?" "I'm at the Vance residence," Lucas replied. "It's a crime scene." Static hissed. Then Marge spoke again, voice lower now. "Figured. Listen, Hawk." Dug into Gideon Kane a little deeper. "You're going to want to hear this." "Go ahead." "He's local all right," Marge said. "Grew up here, lives like a ghost. But he's known for a custom jacket. Heavy wool, almost black, handmade. People remember it because it's ugly as sin and tough as hell." Lucas's gaze dropped into his coat pocket, where the evidence bag rested. The scrap of dark wool inside felt like it had gained weight. Marge continued. "And one more thing. Kane drives a big rig, not a semi, more like a heavy-duty truck, loud, hard to miss. Lucas closed his eyes for a brief second. Big truck, Noah had whispered. Loud. Lucas moved back toward the front door, his flashlight beam sweeping the broken frame. He angled the light up along the splintered wood and froze. There. Caught on a jagged shard of the door jamb were a few dark threads, coarse, thick, nearly black. They were almost invisible against the ruined wood, but Lucas had been trained to see details that wanted to hide. He pulled the evidence bag out and held the scrap up beside the threads. Perfect match. Dispatch, Lucas said, voice low and controlled. I have a positive fiber match at the scene. Kane was here. Copy, Marge said, a hard edge creeping into her tone. You want backup? Lucas thought of the storm, the roads, the time slipping away like blood into snow. He thought of Noah's voice breaking as he clutched the dog. I'm moving, he said. Get me everything you've got on Gideon Kane. Full history, vehicles, known locations, and flag Maya Vance as a confirmed abduction. Already done, Marge replied. Be careful, Hawk. Lucas holstered his weapon and stepped back into the storm. The wind hit him like a wall, but he welcomed it. It kept him sharp. It kept him present. As he drove, the house fell away behind him, swallowed by white. The tricycle disappeared first. Inside the patrol car, the evidence bag sat on the seat beside him. The dark wool seemed to absorb the dim light, a small, silent witness to what had happened in that kitchen. Lucas's thoughts churned, not chaotic, but fast, lining up possibilities and discarding them just as quickly. Kane was violent. Kane was desperate. Kane had taken a woman into a storm because he believed she owed him something. That meant leverage. It also meant time was not on Maya Vance's side. Lucas keyed the radio again. Dispatch, confirm Noah's father. Name's Mark Vance. Deceased? There was a pause, longer this time. Fingers on keys. Databases opening. Confirmed, Marge said. Mark Vance. Died 14 months ago. Vehicle accident. Single car. Rainstorm. Body recovered at scene. Lucas's eyes narrowed. An accident. In bad weather. The words sounded too clean. Run it deeper, he said. Ownership of the vehicle. Associates. The radio hissed as Marge began digging. Lucas drove on, the storm closing in around him, the hunt narrowing from the wide chaos of weather and fear into something sharper, darker, and far more personal. Whatever had happened to Mark Vance had not ended with his death. It had only been waiting. Lucas Reed parked outside the substation without turning the engine off. Snow rattled against the hood, and the wind leaned into the vehicle as if it meant to shove it back the way it had come. The storm had not eased. If anything, it sounded angrier now, less wild, more deliberate, like it had chosen its target and was working toward it with patience. Inside the car, the heater blew hot air that smelled faintly of antifreeze and dust. Lucas didn't feel it. His hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, thoughts locked on the house he had just left behind and the threads he had found there. An abduction didn't happen in a vacuum. It needed motive, leverage, desperation, and desperation always had a history. He killed the engine and stepped back into the storm. The substation felt smaller than it had earlier, as if the walls had moved in while he was gone. Fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied. The front desk chair sat empty. The mat by the door was still damp, where the German Shepherd had collapsed hours earlier. The absence felt loud. Lucas crossed to his office, shedding his wet jacket as he went, and powered up the old desktop computer. It whined in protest, then blinked to life. He logged in, fingers moving with the familiarity of someone who had spent long nights digging through records not meant to be read in one sitting. Dispatch, he said into the radio, clipping it to the desk lamp. Marge, you still with me? A beat of static. Then, always, Marge replied. You find something at the house? Enough, Lucas said. I need you to stay on with me. I'm pulling records on Mark Vance. There was a pause, the sound of keys tapping in the background. That's the husband, right? Yeah. Car accident, Marge said. 14 months back. Nasty one. Lucas pulled up the file. Mark Vance's photo appeared on the screen. Mid-30s, clean-shaven, confident smile that suggested he'd known how to talk his way out of trouble. Or into it. The kind of face people trusted quickly. Single vehicle collision, Lucas read aloud. Rainstorm, vehicle left the road, fire damage. Body was recovered, Marge confirmed. No foul play suspected at the time. Lucas leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving the screen. Run the vehicle, he said. Ownership, registration, insurance. Marge didn't ask why. She never did. Stand by. Lucas scrolled through the accident report. Photos loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. A mangled SUV at the bottom of an embankment. Burn marks licking up the doors. Skid marks, or the lack of them. His jaw tightened. Here we go, Marge said. Vehicle was registered to a small logistics LLC. Joint ownership. Lucas straightened. Joint with who? Another pause. Then, Gideon Kane. The name landed like a physical blow. Lucas exhaled slowly, a thin smile pulling at one corner of his mouth. Not relief. Confirmation. Partners, he murmured. Looks that way, Marge said. LLC didn't last long after the accident. Insurance claim was filed. Denied. Lucas clicked into the insurance tab. The reason for denial glared back at him in bureaucratic language that tried and failed to soften the truth. Undisclosed cargo, evidence of intentional misrepresentation. Lucas felt the shape of the story snapping into place, ugly and familiar. What was the cargo? Not listed, Marge said, which is kind of the point. Lucas closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them again. Run the route, he said. What was Mark driving that night? Coastal highway, Marge replied. Late. Weather was bad. Bad enough to hide something, Lucas said. He pushed back from the desk and stood, pacing the small room. Storms covered sins. Everyone knew that. They erased tracks, swallowed evidence, rewrote timelines. If Mark Vance had wanted something to disappear, cargo, money, proof, a stormy night and a staged accident would do the job nicely. But accidents didn't explain everything. Find me the financials, Lucas said. Anything Kane did after the accident. The radio crackled as Marge worked. Lucas stared at the photo of the wreck again. Something about it bothered him, the angle, the burn pattern. He leaned in closer, tracing lines with his eyes. Vehicle fire originated in the rear, he read quietly. Fuel tank breach. He'd seen enough wrecks to know fires didn't always behave, but they also didn't usually do favors. Marge, he said, was Kane ever charged with anything connected to this? No, she said. Claim was denied, but that was it. He vanished for a while, kept his head down. Lucas nodded slowly. Until now. He turned his attention to Maya Vance's name in the system. Clean. No record, no debts, no warnings. A single mother who had kept her life small and quiet after her husband's death. The kind of person criminals didn't usually target unless they thought she had something they wanted. He thinks she has the money, Lucas said aloud. Money? Marge echoed. Whatever Mark was moving, Lucas continued. Whatever Kane lost when the claim got denied. He thinks Mark hid it, or that Maya knows where it is. Or both, Marge said grimly. Lucas stopped pacing and looked toward the door. The image of Noah clinging to the German shepherd rose unbidden in his mind. A child carrying the weight of an adult man's sins. Run Kane's recent activity, Lucas said. Vehicles, sightings, anything. A pause. Longer this time. You're not gonna like this, Marge said. Try me. He's been asking questions, she said, quietly. About the Vances, about whether Maya ever sold the house, whether she moved money. Nothing solid enough to flag until now. Lucas leaned his hands on the desk, shoulders tense. He's been planning this. Looks that way. Lucas glanced at the clock. Nearly dawn, though the storm made it impossible to tell. Time was compressing, every minute bleeding into the next. He didn't grab Noah, Lucas said slowly. He didn't need to. Marge was silent. He wanted leverage, Lucas continued, but not attention. A missing child brings every badge in the county. A missing adult in a storm. He shook his head. Different story. The radio hissed softly, a sound like distant surf. Lucas, Marge said quietly. It was the first time she'd used his name instead of his call sign. Where do you think he took her? Lucas didn't answer right away. He walked to the window and stared out into the white chaos. The wind was still screaming off the ocean, but beneath it, faint, almost imagined, he thought he could hear something else. Water. Kane was a man who lived at the edges, off-grid, isolated, comfortable where other people weren't. He wouldn't go somewhere busy. He wouldn't go somewhere obvious. And he wouldn't go inland. He's a coastal guy, Lucas said. Truck routes, old access roads, places no one checks in weather like this. North of town? Marge asked. Maybe, Lucas said, but not the logging roads. That's too easy. He turned back to the desk and pulled the evidence bag from his coat pocket. The scrap of dark wool sat inside like a piece of night. He stared at it, then did something impulsive. He picked up the radio again. "Marge, I'm heading back to the clinic." "What?" she said. "Why?" "Because I'm missing my best witness," Lucas replied. He shut down the computer, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. As he crossed the threshold, the storm hit him full force again, but he didn't slow. He drove with a singular focus now, the pieces aligned in his mind like a map he could finally read. Mark Vance hadn't just died. He detonated a partnership. Kane had lost everything: money, control, leverage, and he believed the answers were buried with Mark or hidden by his widow. Desperate men didn't wait forever. Back at the clinic, the parking lot was quieter, the storm muting sound. Lucas killed the engine and stepped out, breath fogging in the cold. Inside, Nurse Diaz looked up, startled. "Officer?" "Where's the dog?" Lucas asked. "In the staff break room," she said. "Dr. Finch is with him." Lucas didn't stop to thank her. He moved quickly down the hall, boots squeaking on linoleum. He pushed open the break room door. The smell of stale coffee and disinfectant hung in the air. Dr. Finch knelt near the far wall, adjusting a blanket. The German Shepherd lay on a pile of hospital linens, IV line reattached, chest rising and falling more evenly now. His eyes lifted the instant Lucas entered the room. There it was again: recognition, purpose. Lucas crouched in front of him and pulled the evidence bag free. He unsealed it carefully and held the scrap of wool near the dog's nose. "You know this," Lucas said quietly. "You know him." The effect was immediate. The dog's body went rigid. His nose flared, drawing in the scent. A deep rumbling sound rolled out of his chest. Not a warning, not fear, a promise. The German Shepherd rose to his feet, weakness forgotten, amber eyes burning with focus. Lucas met that gaze and felt something cold and clear settle into place inside him. "Find him?" he whispered. Outside, the storm howled, but for the first time that night, Lucas felt like he was moving with it instead of against it. The hunt was no longer blind. The German Shepherd did not hesitate. The moment the scrap of dark wool reached his nose, something ancient and precise took over. His body stiffened, spine straightening, as if a wire had been pulled taut beneath his skin. Exhaustion did not disappear. It was still there, heavy and real, but it was shoved aside by purpose. His ears pinned forward. His nostrils flared, drawing in more than scent: memory, fear, rage. Lucas Reed felt it immediately. This was no longer a wounded animal recovering in a clinic. This was a working canine locking onto a target. "Easy," Lucas murmured, more out of respect than control. "Easy, boy." The dog's amber eyes flicked to him once. Acknowledgement. Then they turned back toward the door. Dr. Finch rose slowly from where he'd been kneeling, his expression careful. "He's not ready for a long run," he said. "Physically." "I know," Lucas replied. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, honed and dangerous. "Neither am I." Finch studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "This stopped being a rescue an hour ago, didn't it?" Lucas nodded. "It's a manhunt." "And you think he's your lead?" Lucas clipped the leash to his belt and met the dog's gaze again. "He's not my lead," he said. "He's my witness." The dog stood on shaky legs but did not falter. When Lucas turned toward the door, he followed without being told. Outside, the storm had shifted. The wind no longer screamed in chaotic gusts. It pushed in long, sustained waves, carrying with it the deep, low roar of the Pacific. The blizzard wasn't just horizontal anymore, it was rising, driven inland by something heavier than weather: water. Lucas loaded the dog into the patrol vehicle with care, guiding him onto the back seat where blankets had been spread. The German Shepherd didn't lie down. He stood braced, paws wide, nose pressed toward the cracked window, breathing in the storm. Lucas pulled onto the road, lights off, trusting memory more than sight. Snow and sleet hammered the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it, turning the world into a moving white void. The road markings vanished, the edges blurred. The town itself seemed to dissolve behind him. The dog let out a low, continuous whine. Not panic, not pain, but frustration. The scent was there, strong, and then gone, torn apart by wind, scattered like ash. Lucas clenched his jaw. "I know," he muttered. "I feel it too." He drove north at first, following the logic that had served him earlier. Kane was a ghost, a man who favored places people avoided, old service roads, forgotten stretches of land. But as the minutes dragged on and the dog's agitation grew, doubt crept in. The German shepherd barked once, sharp, abrupt, then pawed at the door. The scent had vanished. Lucas slammed his palm against the steering wheel. Damn it! He eased the vehicle to a stop in the middle of what he hoped was still a road. The engine idled, loud in the sudden pause. Snow piled against the hood, erasing their tracks almost instantly. Lucas closed his eyes. Reacting wouldn't help now. He needed to think. Kane wasn't running blindly. He was desperate, yes. But desperation didn't mean stupidity. He wouldn't go uphill. He wouldn't go inland. A man who lived his life on the edges didn't seek height. He sought cover. He sought water. Lucas's eyes snapped open. Smugglers, truckers, coastal operators, they all thought the same way when pressure closed in. They went to ground. They went where movement was masked and access was limited. And Raven's Roost had one place that fit that description perfectly. The old coastal battery. A relic from another war, half-buried concrete bunkers crouched along the dunes south of town, built to withstand invasion and long since forgotten. They were invisible from the road, accessible only by narrow access paths usually closed in winter. And worse, much worse, those bunkers sat directly on the high tide line. Lucas's radio crackled to life, cutting through the roar of the storm. The voice that came through was not Marge's. It was automated, flat, unemotional. Flash flood warning for all coastal areas. Combination of storm surge and king tides. Catastrophic, life-threatening flooding imminent. Seek higher ground immediately. Lucas's blood ran cold. The ocean wasn't just angry, it was advancing. He wrenched the steering wheel hard to the right, executing a tight, sliding turn that sent the patrol car fishtailing before it caught. Snow sprayed high as he gunned the engine and aimed the vehicle down a narrow, unplowed access road, one he knew by heart, one he'd driven only in daylight and good weather. "Hold on," he told the dog. The German shepherd didn't need encouragement. He planted his paws and leaned into the motion, eyes fixed forward. Branches scraped along the sides of the car like skeletal fingers. Ice-laden limbs snapped at and fell behind them. The wind changed pitch here, deeper and heavier, carrying with it the unmistakable thunder of surf. They burst through the last line of trees, and the world opened up into chaos. The estuary was gone. In its place, a churning, white-capped sea surged inland, swallowing sand, brush, and road alike. The access path ahead had vanished under feet of roiling water. Waves slammed against the dunes with a force that made the ground tremble, and there, jutting from the flooded landscape like broken teeth, were the bunkers. Dark slabs of concrete, half submerged, waves crashing over them again and again. Each impact sent spray high into the air, water pouring through cracks and seams that had held firm for decades and were now surrendering. "She's in there," Lucas breathed. He slammed the vehicle into park, engine still roaring. He grabbed his high-powered flashlight and kicked the door open. The German shepherd launched himself into the water without hesitation. The surge hit him hard, icy and violent, but he drove forward, body low, legs churning. He let out a deep, resonant bark, furious, focused, aimed straight at the nearest bunker. Lucas didn't step into the water. He plunged. The cold was immediate and brutal, stealing his breath, biting into muscle like fire. Water surged to his waist, then his chest, dragging at his legs with relentless force. He fought forward, teeth clenched, holding the flashlight high as waves smashed into him from the side. "Valor!" The name tore out of him before he could stop it. The dog was already ahead, bounding rather than swimming, powerful legs finding purchase where Lucas's boots slipped. He barked again, closer now, sharper. They reached the bunker together. The steel door was recessed, half hidden by collapsing sand. Water poured around the frame, seeping in faster than it could drain out. Lucas slammed his shoulder against it. Locked. "No time," he growled. He raised his service weapon, aimed at the rusted lock, and fired. The sound was swallowed instantly by the storm. He kicked the door. Once, twice. On the third blow, it gave way. Water exploded out of the opening, knocking Lucas back a step as the bunker vomited seawater into the night. He forced his way inside, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. The interior was a concrete tomb. Water sloshed knee-deep and rising fast. The air stank of mildew, rust, and fear. And at the far wall, "Maya!" She was tied to rusted metal rungs, water already at her chest. Her dark hair clung to her face, eyes wild with terror and exhaustion. She struggled weakly against the ropes, breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She wasn't alone. A massive figure loomed near her, back turned, crowbar in hand, prying at a small floor safe embedded in the concrete. He wore a heavy, dark wool jacket, soaked and sagging, beard matted with seawater and sweat. Gideon Kane turned as Lucas entered, his face twisted into disbelief, then rage. "You!" Kane roared. "You shouldn't be here!" Lucas raised his weapon. "Drop it!" Kane laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "The money!" he shouted, pointing at Maya. "She knows where it is!" Water surged higher, slamming against Lucas's legs. The bunker groaned. Kane's eyes flicked from the gun to the rising water, and something in them went dead. "If I can't have it," he whispered, lifting the crowbar, "no one will." He lunged toward Maya. Lucas fired, but the shot went wide as a wave slammed into him from behind. Valor did not miss. The German shepherd launched himself with a sound that was not a bark, but a roar, slamming full force into Kane's chest. The crowbar flew from Kane's hand, disappearing beneath the water as man and dog crashed into the rising flood. Lucas surged forward, cutting Maya free with his knife as water reached his ribs. Behind him, Kane screamed as Valor dragged him under, jaws locked on his shoulder, holding him down. "Valor, out!" Lucas shouted. The dog released instantly, obedience cutting through fury, and Kane went under again, choking. Lucas snapped a cuff onto Kane's wrist, looping it through the metal rung before Kane could recover. "You're done," Lucas snarled. He turned back to Maya, lifting her as another wave slammed into the bunker, sealing the entrance behind them in a wall of black water. The concrete tomb shuddered. Time was gone. Outside, the ocean claimed everything, and they had to fight their way back through it. The bunker tried to swallow them. The moment the door slammed shut behind a sheet of surge, the room turned into a moving trap, water rising, air thinning, sound distorted by concrete walls, and the constant, brutal pounding of waves outside. Lucas Reed held Maya Vance upright with one arm locked under her shoulders, her body limp in shock, her breath shallow and erratic. She wasn't fighting him. That was the problem. People who could still fight usually did. "Stay with me," he said into her ear, loud enough to cut through the chaos. "Maya, look at me." Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, then fixed briefly on his face as another wave hit the outer wall. The bunker shuddered. Rust flakes rained from the ceiling like dark snow. At Lucas's feet, the German shepherd, Cairo, stood trembling, water up to his chest, muscles tight, ears flat. He looked smaller in the flood, not because he was small, but because water stole leverage. Still, he stayed between Lucas and Gideon Kane, as if he expected the man to rise again. Kane was cuffed to the wall rungs where Maya had been. He sputtered and coughed, half kneeling, half floating, his soaked wool jacket dragging him down like a guilty conscience. The heavy beard that had made him a myth around town clung to his face in wet ropes. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, anger and fear braided together until they were indistinguishable. "You don't understand," Kane rasped, trying to pull against the cuff. Metal clanked. The rung held. "That money, Mark, save it," Lucas snapped. He didn't spare the man another glance. There was no room left for explanations, not in a room filling with seawater. Lucas flashed the light toward the entrance. The door was still open a crack, water forcing its way in like a living thing. Beyond it, darkness and roaring surf. They were running out of time. Lucas tightened his grip on Maya. "We're moving," he said. Maya's head lolled. Her lips were blue now, her skin turning a sickly gray as the cold reclaimed her. Lucas felt a spike of fury that wasn't about Kane. It was about the way the world worked, how quickly it could turn ordinary life into this. He dragged Maya toward the doorway. Cairo followed without needing command, swimming rather than walking now, his powerful shoulders driving through the current. The dog's eyes never left Lucas's hands on Maya, as if his mind had decided, protect the package. Behind them, Kane laughed, a raw, broken sound that ended in a cough. "You'll leave me," he choked. "You'll leave me to drown." Lucas didn't answer. He couldn't. If he spoke, he might say something true and ugly. He kept moving, boots scraping on submerged concrete. A wave hit the bunker again, harder. The water surged, slamming Lucas's legs out from under him. He fell backward. For a sickening second, everything turned black and cold. Water swallowed his mouth, filled his ears, yanked at his belt and gear. Maya's weight dragged him down. Lucas fought, kicking, forcing himself upright. When his head broke the surface, he coughed salt and air, eyes burning. Maya was still in his arms, barely. Her face was slack now, mouth slightly open, breath absent for a terrifying beat. "No," Lucas growled and hauled her higher. "Not today." He staggered through the doorway and out into open water. The world outside the bunker was worse. The dunes were dissolving. The access road had become a channel of churning black water and foam. The patrol car's headlights, still on, shone across the surge like a weak lighthouse. The distance was maybe 100 yards. It might as well have been a mile. Lucas turned his body so his back faced the waves, using his frame as a shield for Maya. He began to move backward, step by step, feeling for footing under the water. Every step was an argument with the ocean. Cairo stayed glued to his side. The dog swam, nose just above the surface, eyes wide and determined. His breathing came in harsh, strained pulls. Lucas could see exhaustion in the way the dog's shoulders dipped between strokes. Cairo had already spent everything earlier. Now he was spending what he didn't have. "Good," Lucas grunted between breaths. "Stay with me." Debris struck Lucas's thigh, something wooden, maybe a broken plank, pain flaring instantly. He ignored it. Another wave hit his back, and he bent his knees, braced, absorbing the impact the way he'd been taught to take recoil. He moved again. He kept moving. The headlights didn't get closer quickly enough. Maya's head slid against his shoulder. Lucas angled his chin down, pressed his cheek briefly to her hair, and spoke into the storm like the storm could hear him. "Your kid's alive," he said. "Noah's alive. Don't you dare quit now." As if the words mattered to anything but him, Maya coughed. A small, weak sound, barely more than a vibration. Lucas felt it through her chest and almost laughed. A sharp, disbelieving laugh that tasted like salt. "That's it," he said. "That's the first smart thing you've done all night. Keep doing it." Cairo bumped against Lucas's knee, nearly losing his position in the current. Lucas reached down without looking and hooked a hand under the dog's collar for a moment, steadying him, sharing balance the way he'd shared it with teammates in surf zones. "Hang on," he told Cairo. "Almost there." The ocean disagreed. The undertow pulled hard at Lucas's calves, dragging him sideways. He felt his footing slip. He dug down with his boots, found gravel, barely, and pushed forward again. His legs were numb now. The cold had gotten past pain and into something deeper, a deadened heaviness that made movement feel delayed. He fought anyway. At last, his heels struck something solid, the edge of the access road. Gravel. Real ground. Lucas shoved forward, half stumbling, half crawling, hauling Maya with him until he could get one knee on the submerged path. Cairo scrambled beside him, claws scraping, body shaking uncontrollably. Lucas reached the patrol car. He yanked the back door open and shoved Maya inside with all the gentleness he could no longer afford. He climbed in after her, slammed the door, and fumbled for the radio with fingers that didn't want to work. "Dispatch," he said, voice rough. "This is Hawk. I have the victim. Maya Vance is with me. Repeat. Victim recovered, alive. Severe hypothermia, unresponsive." Static burst, then Marge's voice cracked through, suddenly sharp with relief. "Copy. Hawk, where are you?" "Old Coastal Battery," Lucas said. "Access road is flooded. I need high water evac, now." "On it," Marge said. "Stay put." Lucas's gaze flicked toward the windshield. Outside, the bunker was nearly gone. Only a dark shape in the surge. He swallowed hard, then keyed the mic again. "Dispatch," he said, lower now. "I also have the suspect. Gideon Kane. He's cuffed inside the bunker. If we don't extract him, he'll drown." There was a long pause, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Marge finally said, "Copy. Sheriff's on his way." Lucas let his head fall back against the seat for a brief second. Not relief, not victory, just the thin, shaky awareness that they had survived the first part. Cairo tried to jump into the back seat but failed, slipping on the wet ground. The dog let out a strained whine, frustration and exhaustion in one sound. Lucas shoved the front door open, reached down, and hauled Cairo up with both hands, pulling him into the vehicle. Cairo collapsed on the floorboard, trembling violently, but he kept his head lifted, eyes locked on Maya, still on watch. "Yeah," Lucas muttered, breath fogging. "I see you. You can rest soon, just not yet." The storm outside didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder, waves hammering the dunes like fists on a locked door. Lucas watched through the smeared windshield, waiting for lights, for movement, for anything that wasn't white chaos. Then he saw them. High beams cut through the blizzard, tall, powerful, riding above the surge. A massive high-water rescue truck pushed toward them, engine growling, tires sending waves rolling outward. It stopped beside the patrol car with a violent hiss of displaced water. Sheriff Brody climbed down. He was in his late 60s, built thick and solid like old timber, face weathered into permanent lines by decades of wind and hard decisions. His hair was mostly gray, cropped short, and his eyes were the calm, unromantic eyes of a man who had seen enough to stop being impressed by disaster. He moved with the blunt confidence of someone who didn't ask storms for permission. "Hawk!" Brody shouted over the wind. "Give her to me." Two deputies waded forward, reaching into the car. Lucas handed Maya over, carefully, unwilling to let go until he felt their grip secure. "She's alive," Lucas yelled. "Hypothermia. She needs heat now." Brody nodded sharply. "We've got her." "The suspect," Lucas began. "In the bunker," Lucas finished, pointing toward the dark shape in the surge. "Cuffed to the rungs." Brody's face tightened, but he nodded again. "We'll get cutters. We'll get him out." A deputy grabbed Lucas's arm. "You're done, man. Get in the truck." Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to go back, wanted to finish everything himself the way his body had been trained to finish missions. But then he looked down. Cairo was barely upright, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. His eyes were dull now, exhaustion finally claiming him. He'd given everything. Lucas swallowed and nodded once. "Okay." He scooped Cairo up, 90 pounds of wet fur and stubborn heart, and carried him to the rescue truck. The dog didn't protest. His head fell against Lucas's shoulder like a tired child. Inside the truck, heat blasted them, stinging Lucas's frozen skin. He sat with Cairo on the floor beside him, one hand resting on the dog's neck, feeling the tremor gradually ease. Through the truck window, Lucas watched deputies move toward the bunker with floodlights and pry bars, silhouettes fighting the sea. Cain would live to face justice. Lucas didn't feel satisfaction about that. Justice was a process. Survival was a moment. His radio crackled again, Marge's voice, hoarse, relieved. "Clinic's ready for Maya. Noah's stable, asking for the dog." Lucas looked down at Cairo, then out at the storm. "Tell him," Lucas said quietly, "his dog's coming home." The truck turned, pushing back through the floodwater, carrying them toward light and warmth. Outside, the ocean still raged. But the storm had failed to take what it had come for. It had not taken the boy's life. It had not taken the mother. And it had not taken the dog's promise. When the storm finally faded, it became clear that the miracle was never the absence of danger. The miracle was presence. God did not stop the blizzard. He did not quiet the ocean. He did not erase the pain or the fear. Instead, he sent strength, in the form of a man who refused to turn away, and a loyal dog who would not leave a child alone in the cold. Sometimes, God doesn't part the waters. Sometimes he teaches us how to walk through them together. In our own lives, we all face storms. Storms of loss, storms of fear, storms that make us feel small, forgotten, or alone. And when we kneel in those storms, exhausted, afraid, and out of strength, we may not hear thunder from heaven, but we may feel a hand reach for us, a door open, a presence that says, "You are not alone." That is how miracles often arrive, quietly, faithfully, through ordinary people who choose compassion over comfort. So, today be that presence for someone else. Be the one who notices. Be the one who stops. Be the one who stays. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Comment and if you believe in quiet miracles, and subscribe to this channel for more stories of faith, courage, and love. May God bless you and your family. May He protect you through every storm you face. And may you never forget, even in the darkest night, you are never truly alone. Amen.